The sun hadn't fully risen when Amara Thompson stepped off the city shuttle bus outside Terminal C of the airport. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and fast food, the kind of sensory blend that belonged only to places like this, full of movement, of goodbyes, and of people rushing to be somewhere else. She moved quietly, her boots hitting the pavement with a soft, even rhythm. No one noticed her. She wore faded jeans and a gray hoodie zipped up to her collarbone. The hood was down, revealing short, tightly curled hair and a face that had known long nights and dry places. She didn't walk like she was in a hurry, and she didn't seem lost either. She moved like someone with purpose, just tired. A small military-style duffel bag hung over her shoulder. It was dark green canvas, frayed at the seams, and carried not just weight, but history. People around her bustled past with rolling luggage and Starbucks cups, juggling phone calls and gate changes. But Amara just kept moving, silent, composed. Alone inside the terminal, lines had already begun to stretch and snake. Families grouped around luggage, couples whispered over boarding passes, and overhead announcements crackled names that were always slightly mispronounced. Amara stood near a self-check-in kiosk for a moment before walking toward the TSA security line. She didn't look around much. Eye contact invited questions. She wasn't in the mood. As she approached the TSA checkpoint, she moved into line. Without hesitation, there were about 20 people ahead of her. She waited patiently, her arms relaxed by her sides, the duffel resting near her feet. A child ahead of her dropped a stuffed dinosaur. Amara picked it up and handed it back without a word. The mother gave a polite nod and looked away. A TSA officer at the conveyor belt scanned the crowd with habitual scrutiny. His gaze passed over an elderly man, a young woman with a baby, 2 college-age guys in hoodies, and then landed on Amara. His eyes narrowed for half a second. She felt it. The second officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a nameplate that read J. Hartley, leaned toward him. "That her?" she asked quietly. He nodded. They didn't need to explain what that meant. The line inched forward. Amara didn't flinch when it was her turn. She placed her phone and wallet into the plastic bin and slowly unzipped the duffel. Her fingers paused for a fraction of a second, then continued. She pulled out her laptop and placed it in its own bin, then removed her boots. She wasn't surprised when Officer Hartley stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said with the polished calm of someone who'd said it 1,000 times before. "Random screening. Please step to the side." Amara didn't protest. She simply picked up her things and followed the officer toward a side table near the front of the checkpoint. It wasn't a private room. It was in full view of everyone. Passing through, a man 2 places back in line frowned slightly. "Is that really necessary?" he muttered under his breath. His wife nudged him. "Don't get involved." Amara remained silent. She watched as they laid her bag on the table and unzipped it completely. One by one, the officers began pulling out its contents. A change of socks, a paperback novel with a cracked spine, toothpaste, a bar of soap still wrapped in a brown paper label, a small, tightly rolled towel, a sealed envelope addressed in handwriting. Maya Thompson, 517 Hope Street, Columbus. Then came the gloves, old, black, the knuckles worn and the fingers torn at the tips. One of the officers held them up, inspecting them. "No wires or metal," he said, "just worn." They moved slowly, efficiently, but the tone had changed. There was something odd about how little Amara carried. No makeup, no souvenirs, no jewelry, not even a phone charger. The items were too few, too carefully placed, too deliberate. The man who had muttered earlier was still watching. So were others now. Not all of them judgmental. Some were just curious. What was so strange about this quiet woman that she needed to be pulled aside and laid bare in front of strangers? One of the agents reached to the bottom of the bag and pulled out something that had been folded tightly. Almost reverently, it was fabric, dark green, stiff, military. Issue, and neatly folded to regulation standards, The officer paused. Amara watched him, but still said nothing. Her face didn't change. Agent unfolded it slowly. It was a U.S. Army combat uniform, complete with insignia and name tape. Tattooing sewn next to it, in a padded, clear pouch, was a Purple Heart medal. The air in the checkpoint shifted. Subtle, but unmistakable. The search stopped. The crowd that had only minutes ago watched her with suspicion, or worse, indifference, had fallen silent. The officers, unsure now, looked at one another. "Ma'am," Hartley finally said, softer now, "is this yours?" Amara nodded once. Yes. Her voice was even flat. Not hostile, not proud, just matter of fact. "It's mine." No further explanation was offered. None was needed. A folded uniform, a Purple Heart, symbols that told a story without. Single sentence. The agents didn't know what to say. And Amara? She just stood there, calm, dignified, tired, and still unseen by most until that moment. The search table remained still, the atmosphere uneasy. Amara stood there, hands clasped calmly in front of her, while the two TSA officers exchanged quiet, uncertain glances. The uniform they'd just discovered lay draped across the table, its clean lines and combat badges speaking volumes, yet somehow not enough for them to fully understand who stood before them. Hartley hesitated, her hand hovering over the Purple Heart, as if she wasn't sure whether to touch it or salute. Beside her, the younger officer, Davis, looked increasingly uncomfortable, his eyes darting from the medal to Amara's face and back again. Amara said nothing. She wasn't here to explain herself. Behind her, the security line had slowed. Travelers glanced in her direction, most trying to make sense of what was happening. Some thought it was part of a drill. Others had no clue what they were witnessing, only that the quiet woman now had everyone's attention. But then, the unspoken moment cracked. "I'm sorry, but we still need to finish the check," Davis said, his voice subdued, but procedural. Hartley shot him a quick look, not of disagreement, but of reluctance. They both knew they'd crossed into a space that felt less like standard procedure and more like stepping onto hallowed ground. But the rules were the rules. Amara gave a small nod, granting permission. "Go ahead." The rest of the items in the bag were sparse. A Bible, dog tags, a tightly wrapped cloth pouch containing several foreign coins, and one bullet casing. It wasn't loaded, not dangerous, but symbolic, something veterans often kept. A keepsake from somewhere they couldn't forget. Davis handled it gently, unsure what it meant, but sensing it mattered. Then came the folded letter. Hartley picked it up. The envelope was worn, its corners rounded, the paper faded. A name was written. In blue ink, SGT, Amara Thompson. There was no return address. She didn't open it, just set it beside the uniform. "Looks like everything checks out," Hartley said softly. But the damage, in a way, had already been done, not by what they found, but by how they had looked for it. "You've been traveling low?" Davis asked, trying too late to sound casual. Amara offered a slight shrug. 3 days, from Kandahar to Ramstein. Then D.C., then here. Hartley's brow furrowed. "You just got back from overseas?" "Final deployment," Amara said. "Rotation ended last month. I was processing out. Had to take the cheapest military flight I could get." She glanced toward the terminal gate. "Trying to get home before my sister's baby arrives." It wasn't a plea for sympathy. It was an explanation, calm, quiet, unburdened. A man. Near the checkpoint, dressed in a navy blazer and scrolling through his phone, overheard the conversation. He looked up. Recognition flickered in his expression. "I think I've seen her in the papers," he murmured to his wife. "Something about a unit ambushed in Helmand last year. She pulled 3 of her team out under fire." Amara didn't hear that part. Her attention was elsewhere. A woman with 2 toddlers was openly staring now, her expression unreadable. A teenage boy beside her had stopped chewing gum and just watched with wide, blinking eyes. The murmurs had started, not of mockery or scorn this time, but curiosity. Still, Amara remained silent. It wasn't the first time she'd been stared at. In Afghanistan, she'd been stared at by children with rifles and villagers with silent grief in their eyes. But this was different. This was home. And yet somehow, it didn't feel like it. Davis gently began placing the contents back into her duffel, slower now, more carefully. He folded the uniform again, trying to mimic the precision she must have used. He wasn't quite right. The corners were uneven, but the attempt was there. "I'm sorry, Sergeant," he said after a long pause. Amara looked at him. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Not really. It wasn't about the search. Not entirely. It was about being misjudged before a word was spoken. About the whispers and the sideways glances. About being pulled aside and made to justify her presence in a country she had risked her life defending. A man in a business suit passed by and caught sight of the Purple Heart still on the table. He stopped, stepped back, and looked at Amara with growing awareness. "Are you military?" he asked. She nodded. "Thank you for your service," he said immediately. Amara gave a tight smile. "You're welcome." One voice became a ripple. A young woman in a Yale hoodie echoed the thanks. Then another man, older, retired, with a veteran's ball cap, stepped forward and offered a nod that said more than any words could. Hartley quietly zipped the duffel, closed, and pushed it toward Amara. "You're clear to go," she said, her tone respectful now. "Gate B14. Amara took her bag, slung it over her shoulder. "Thank you." And just like that, she walked away. But the tension she left behind stayed. The checkpoint no longer buzzed with idle chatter. Officers worked more quietly. Travelers seemed to think more deeply. The incident, brief, easily forgotten by most, would stay with a few of them much longer than they expected. As Amara moved toward her gate, she passed an electronic display showing delayed departures and boarding calls. Her eyes lingered for a second. Then she sat quietly at an empty chair near the window, staring out at the tarmac. The duffel sat on her lap, arms draped over it protectively. She didn't need anyone to make a scene. She didn't want applause or praise. All she ever asked for was the right to come home with dignity. The waiting area near Gate B14 was slowly filling up, a blend of business travelers, vacationing families, and the usual crowd of earbuds, hoodies, and coffee cups. No one noticed Amara when she sat down at first. She took the seat farthest from the charging ports and vending machines, close to the wide pane of glass overlooking the tarmac. Her bag rested across her knees again, the zipper half closed, as if she hadn't wanted to seal it just yet. The edge of the folded uniform was visible, neat and precise, against the weathered fabric of the duffel. Her fingers rested lightly on it, not possessive, but protective. She exhaled quietly. No one knew what that bag had been through, what it had carried, how many miles it had traveled, stuffed into dusty Humvees, cargo planes, and cramped barracks. How many nights it had been used as a pillow in places where sleeping could get you killed. Now, here in a quiet corner of an American airport, it had become the focal point of something else entirely: misunderstanding, scrutiny, and a small frozen moment of regret. Across the terminal, a TSA officer still watched her from a distance. Davis. His expression was hard to read. Maybe guilt, maybe just thoughtfulness. Hartley had already returned to the checkpoint, but Davis remained. After a few minutes, he picked up his radio, said something, and walked away. Amara kept her gaze fixed on the window. A plane taxied slowly by, its engine roar muffled through the thick glass. Rain had started to fall in the distance, a fine mist threading across the runway. It made the lights shimmer. A few passengers near her shifted their attention. A man in his 50s, with a laptop, glanced her way. Then again. Something about the way she sat, straight-backed, alert despite her exhaustion, stood out. Not forced, just ingrained. Like someone who'd spent too long being watched and never knew when she'd need to act. She looked like a soldier, even without the uniform on. And soon, they began to see it. It started with the older woman in the red jacket, 3 seats down. She'd seen the commotion at security earlier and had made her way to the gate afterward. Curiosity and intuition guiding her. Now her eyes lingered on Amara's duffel, spotting the insignia patch sewn into one corner. She leaned over. "Are you Army?" Amara nodded without looking away from the window. "Yes, ma'am." The woman smiled, soft and warm. "My husband was in the Navy. Vietnam." Amara turned slightly, offering a polite smile. "Thank you both." "No, thank you," the woman said, "for everything." That was the moment it shifted. The man with the laptop looked up again, having overheard. A college student scrolling through TikTok paused, pulled out one earbud, and glanced over. He saw the uniform, not flashy, not parade-ready, but folded like something sacred. The kind of thing that didn't just symbolize service, but survival. Mother and daughter sat down nearby, their chatter fading as they noticed the subtle ripple forming. The mother looked at Amara, then the bag, and whispered something to her daughter, who nodded solemnly. Then, a low, sudden voice cut through the ambient buzz of the terminal. "She's the one. Staff Sergeant Thompson, the one from Helmand." It came from a tall man standing near the gate agent's desk, holding a worn leather briefcase. He was speaking to no one in particular, but loud enough to be heard. He held up his phone, showing a photo on the screen, a news article. Someone nearby leaned in to look. The headline read, "Hero Sergeant Saves Unit During Ambush in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Amara Thompson receives Bronze Star." Below it was a photo. Amara in full gear, dirt-streaked face, gripping her rifle, surrounded by 4 fellow soldiers. Her eyes, even in the grainy picture, were sharp, alive, uncheckable. Passengers began murmuring. Phones came out. The article spread. Someone tapped their partner and pointed. Another leaned toward their child and explained who she was. And still, Amara didn't move. She knew the story. She had lived it. The ambush had lasted less than 12 minutes, but it had felt like a lifetime. She'd lost 2 men that day. Her squad mates. She dragged one wounded soldier 200 yards under fire with nothing but adrenaline, instinct, and the strength of years she hadn't even realized she'd earned. The military had called her a hero. She had just wanted to finish the mission. Now, in this terminal, surrounded by strangers who were beginning to piece it together, she felt something close to discomfort creep in. Attention was never her goal. Recognition, while appreciated always, came with a shadow, the memory of the cost. Is that really her? Someone whispered. The woman who ran back into fire? She doesn't look like a hero, said a teenager under his breath, though not unkindly, more in awe. A little girl approached hesitantly, holding a granola bar. "My mommy says you're brave," she said, offering it with both hands. Amara blinked, taken off guard for the first time all morning. She crouched slightly, accepting the snack with a small smile. "Tell your mommy thank you." Behind them, someone clapped. a single awkward clap that quickly spread as others joined, softly at first, then louder, until the entire gate area was applauding, not because they were told to, because they chose to. Amara stood, the duffel still in her hand, the uniform folded against her side. She gave a nod, humble, restrained, but deeply human. Her eyes scanned the crowd once, then returned to the window. The rain was falling harder now, but for the first time all day, it didn't feel cold. The applause at gate B14 faded slowly, like ripples from a stone tossed into still water. It hadn't been loud, not really, not like a sports crowd or a celebrity entrance. But it had been real, honest, raw. It had moved through strangers like a shared breath. And then, almost just as quickly, it was gone. And in its place, there was silence, not the kind born from awkwardness, but something more reverent, a collective pause. The kind of silence that settled in churches, in graveside farewells, or between veterans when words would only ruin what they all understood. Amara remained still. She hadn't expected any of it. Not the murmurs, not the headlines being whispered aloud, not the child's granola bar, and certainly not the clapping. For a moment, she thought of slipping away, of taking her bag and finding a quieter seat. But something inside her said, not this time. She had spent so many years disappearing into the background. In uniform, she was visible but unseen. Out of uniform, she was invisible altogether. But now they had seen her, and it changed something. Man stood up slowly 2 rows down and walked toward her. He was old, maybe in his 70s, wearing a baseball cap stitched with 2 words, Korea veteran. His walk had the slow, measured pace of a man whose body had carried too many winters, but whose spine still held honor. He stopped in front of her. Saluted. Amara straightened automatically, her back instinctively firming, her heels coming together. She returned the salute, crisp, quiet, clean. The old man's eyes watered. Welcome home, Sergeant. Her jaw clenched slightly. The words hit her harder than she'd expected. Thank you, sir. Another silence, heavy with unspoken history. Man nodded once more, then turned and walked back to his seat. No words had been exchanged beyond the basics, but none were needed. He had seen war. So had she. That was enough. A few rows behind him, a woman in a sleek pantsuit slowly stood and crossed over. She didn't say anything at first, just looked. At the duffel bag, the insignia still visible, the Purple Heart's protective pouch tucked into the side. Her voice, when it came, was soft. I saw you, she said, on the news. You pulled that corporal out of the burning Humvee. Amara didn't respond at first. She hated that footage. It had been captured from a helmet cam worn by one of her squad mates. She hadn't known it existed until months after the fact. She didn't like watching it, or remembering it. She nodded. Once, reluctantly. Yeah, the woman exhaled. My brother served. He didn't make it back. Amara's expression softened. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just ... Thank you. Amara's throat felt tight. She didn't know what to say to that. So she just gave a faint nod. The woman smiled, pressed a hand lightly to her heart, and returned to her seat. Silence again. Not one of discomfort, but of shared understanding. It had become something sacred now. No one asked for selfies. No one dared turn this into a spectacle. For once, the terminal became a still point in the chaos of a constantly moving world. Then, Davis appeared. The TSA officer from earlier stood at the edge of the gate area, holding a cup of coffee. He spotted her, hesitated, and walked forward. She saw him coming and waited. He extended the cup to her. Didn't know how you take it, so I kept it simple. Cream, no sugar. Amara blinked, slightly stunned. You didn't have to. I know, he said. But I wanted to. She accepted the cup and nodded her thanks. Davis shifted awkwardly. I looked you up after you walked away. Hadn't realized who you were. He glanced around. I mean, I should have, but you know how it is. A lot of people come through. Amara took a sip of the coffee. It was lukewarm, slightly bitter, but comforting. I do know, she said quietly. I just ... I wanted to say I'm sorry, again. He looked her in the eye this time, not just for the search, but for how it happened. How it looked. We shouldn't need proof to respect someone. That made her pause. Amara looked at him for a long moment. Thank you for saying that. He gave a small nod. You heading home? Yeah, she said. Haven't been back in almost 3 years. My sisters do any day now. Davis smiled faintly. Hope you get there in time. Voice crackled over the intercom. Final boarding call for Flight 288 to Columbus, Georgia. Gate B14. Final call. Amara stood. She picked up the duffel and slid the coffee into the side pocket. The uniform was still there, folded just as it had been. She looked around the gate area once more, at the old veteran, at the woman in the suit, at the passengers who had applauded and then gone quiet again. They didn't know everything, but they knew enough. And maybe that was all she ever needed. As she walked toward the boarding line, a little boy looked up at her and whispered to his father, She's a soldier, right? His dad nodded. Yeah, a real one. Amara didn't look back, but for the first time in a long time, she felt the silence following her wasn't about suspicion or fear. It was respect. The boarding tunnel echoed with quiet footfalls as Amara stepped onto the plane, her duffel gripped firmly in one hand. She felt the eyes of the flight attendant on her immediately, not out of suspicion, but with a tentative recognition. That had become more common in the last few hours. Welcome aboard, the attendant said, then paused as her gaze dropped to the duffel, where the corner of the folded uniform and a sliver of the Purple Heart pouch peeked out. Her eyes widened slightly. You're Staff Sergeant Thompson, aren't you? Amara froze for the briefest moment before offering a tired smile. Yes, ma'am. I read about you, the woman said, lowering her voice as if not to draw attention. Last year, after the ambush. I remember the story. You pulled your team out when the convoy got hit. You saved people. Amara's expression barely changed, but her eyes clouded for just a second. I did what I had to. The attendant nodded, visibly moved. Thank you. Truly. Please, seat 17C, but if you need anything at all, just let me know. Amara thanked her quietly and moved through the narrow aisle, past rows of passengers still loading bags, shifting coats, and adjusting seatbelts. Some had already recognized her. Others only noticed the quiet respect that now seemed to follow her like a shadow as she settled into her seat. The window beside her offering a misty view of the tarmac. She placed the duffel across her lap and held it close, almost like armor. The folded uniform pressed against her ribs, a weight that felt both grounding and burdensome. The plane filled slowly. A young woman took the aisle seat beside her, smiled politely, then glanced at the bag. You coming home from deployment? She asked. Sort of, Amara said. The woman hesitated. Sorry, I don't mean to pry. Amara shook her head. It's okay. I'm just trying to make it home before my niece is born. That's sweet, the woman said, then paused again. I know this is probably weird, but are you the one from that article? The sergeant who carried her team leader back under fire? Amara blinked slowly. That story again. Yeah, that was me. The woman's eyes softened. My dad's a vet. He cried when he read about you. I think you reminded him of a few friends he lost. You're kind of a hero to him. Amara didn't respond right away. Hero was a word that never sat right with. Her, not because she didn't appreciate it, but because she knew what it cost to be called that. And who didn't make it home to hear it? The ambush had taken place just outside a remote forward operating base in Helmand Province. Their convoy had hit an IED, and within seconds, everything had turned to fire and metal. One of their vehicles was flipped, pinned, with 2 soldiers inside. Amara had heard the screams before she saw the flames. She remembered climbing across twisted wreckage, dragging one man out by his belt, bullets snapping the sand around her. Another soldier, Ramirez, had already lost too much blood. He hadn't made it. She still carried his dog tag, still wrote letters to his mother every few months. She didn't tell the woman next to her any of this. Instead, she gave a small smile and looked back out the window. As the plane taxied, turbulence rocked them gently side to side. The cabin grew quieter as safety announcements rolled overhead, but Amara barely listened. Her mind was drifting, not with anxiety, but with memory. Faces, moments, the strange rhythm of war and waiting. The bond forged through shared silence and terrible noise. After takeoff, the attendant returned, crouched beside Amara's seat, and handed her a folded napkin with a note scribbled and penned out. It read, "My brother didn't come home from Iraq. Thank you for being someone else's reason to survive." A grateful stranger, Amara stared at it for a long moment, then folded it carefully and slid it into the same pouch that held Ramirez's dog tag. Recognition had never been her goal. In fact, for most of her time in the army, she had preferred the shadows, the quiet roles, the back row positions, the tasks no one noticed unless they were done wrong. She led because she had to, not because she craved command. But something had changed over the years. It wasn't about medals. It was about being seen, not as a symbol, not as an article, but as a person. A woman, a soldier, a survivor. And now, as the clouds passed beneath them and the cabin settled into stillness, she began to let go of the morning's tension. The search, the doubt, the judgment, the shame that hadn't belonged to her, but had been placed on her shoulders anyway. Now, the silence that surrounded her wasn't the cold, suspicious kind. It was peaceful, a kind of reverence she hadn't expected. It was as if the world, or at least this small plane full of strangers, had begun to remember the sacrifices that never made headlines. She didn't need them to understand the full story. She just needed them to recognize that she carried it. And as the plane cut through the early evening sky, Amara rested her head back, her eyes closed, the folded uniform steady across her lap. Not forgotten. Not ignored. Not this time. The plane had landed an hour ago. Amara stood in the baggage claim area now, duffel slung over her shoulder, waiting silently among a sea of rolling luggage and sleepy passengers. The air was thick with the buzz of reunions, laughter, hugs, camera flashes, but she remained still, watching the carousel spin with an absent stare. She didn't check her phone. She didn't fidget. She just waited, her presence quiet but undeniable. The folded uniform still lay nestled in her bag. She hadn't touched it since boarding, but she felt its weight more than ever. The recognition she'd received earlier on the plane hadn't left her mind. Not just the applause or the kind words. It was the way people had looked at her, with respect, yes, but also with something deeper. Like they were realizing just how much they hadn't seen before. For some of them, it seemed like an awakening. For her, it was something else. It was exhausting. A child's voice rang out nearby, not crying, just excited. Amara glanced over and saw a little boy running toward a man in fatigues. The soldier lifted the boy into his arms and spun him around. His uniform was sharp, pressed, fresh out of the hangar. Everyone around them smiled. Some clapped. A woman nearby wiped a tear from her cheek. Amara looked away, Her welcome had been different. Not wrong, just complicated. Footsteps approached her from the left. She didn't turn until the voice followed. Sergeant Thompson? Amara turned and immediately recognized the man in the TSA uniform. Officer Davis. His hat was tucked under his arm, and his posture was casual but respectful. Didn't expect to see you here, she said. He shrugged. I was on break. Saw your name still on the flight board and figured I'd come say. Something better. She raised an eyebrow. Better? He nodded, shifting awkwardly. The way we handled things back there. It wasn't right. Amara gave him a long look. You were doing your job. He sighed. Maybe. But sometimes. Just doing the job turns into forgetting who we're talking to, who we're looking at. I didn't see you? Not really. And I should have. There was sincerity in his voice, the kind that couldn't be faked. Amara studied him for a moment, then nodded once. Thank you. Davis offered a half smile. You heading home now? She nodded. Yeah, my sister's house. She's due in 2 days. Big moment? Amara's eyes softened. Bigger than mine. Just then, a small voice behind Davis cut through the background noise. Is that her, Daddy? A little girl peeked out from behind his leg. She couldn't have been more than 6. Curly hair, wide eyes, holding a crayon-colored card in both hands. Davis smiled sheepishly. I-U-H. The girl stepped forward and held out the card. Amara crouched slightly to meet her at eye level. The card was decorated in bright colors and crooked stars. Inside, written in large, wobbly letters, were the words, Thank you for being so brave. Welcome home. Amara blinked once, then again. Something caught in her chest. Did you draw this? She asked. The girl nodded proudly. It's beautiful, Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. She accepted the card gently and tucked it into her bag. Beside the folded napkin and Ramirez's dog tag. It joined the others in her small collection of moments worth remembering. Davis looked away for a second, giving her space. I'll let you go. Just wanted to say what I didn't back at the gate. He turned to leave, then paused. You matter, Sergeant. Even when no one's looking. Then he was gone, his daughter skipping beside him. Amara stood there for us while processing it all. She hadn't cried during deployment, not when she lost people, not even when she came home. But something about that card, those clumsy little stars and crayon-colored letters, loosened something inside her. She exhaled slowly and walked toward the exit. Just before she reached the doors, a familiar voice crackled through the terminal. Loudspeakers. It was the same flight attendant from earlier. To the passengers of Flight 288, we'd like to extend a special thank you to Staff Sergeant Amara Thompson for her service. Welcome home, Sergeant. The announcement echoed through the baggage claim like a wave. Heads turned. Applause rose again. Not thunderous, not orchestrated, but spontaneous. Genuine. People clapped as she passed, some rising from benches, others simply smiling and nodding. Even the airline staff at the help desk stood and offered salutes. Amara felt the heat rush to her face. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just walked, tall, quiet, holding her bag close. Somewhere in that bag, beneath the medals, the dog tags, and the worn keepsakes of a life lived on the edge, was a piece of her soul she hadn't let go of yet. But she was getting there. Each step forward wasn't just a return. It was a reclaiming. The cab pulled into the quiet cul-de-sac just as the evening sun dipped below the Georgia treetops. The houses were modest, single-story, set far enough apart to give a sense of space, but close enough to feel like neighbors. Wind chimes tinkled softly from porches. A dog barked in the distance. Sprinklers hissed against green lawns. It didn't look like a battlefield. Amara sat still for a moment after the driver shifted the car into park. She stared out the window at the small beige house with the cracked front step and a porch swing that leaned slightly to the left. A faded welcome mat waited by the door. The porch light was already on her sister's house. She took a slow breath, reached for her duffel bag, and stepped out. The driver popped the trunk for her, but Amara waved him off. No need. This is all I've got. He watched her for a moment, then nodded. You take care, Sergeant. Thanks, she said as the cab pulled away. The evening fell quiet again. Amara stood in the driveway, staring at the front door like it was something more complicated than wood and hinges. It had been 3 years since she'd seen Maya in person, longer since she'd stepped foot in this home. Their texts had become more regular lately, especially as the due date approached, but the physical distance had been intentional. Some things, even between sisters, took time to repair. She walked up the path slowly, her boots crunching softly against the gravel. When she reached the door, she didn't knock right away. Her fingers hovered over the wood. Then finally, she rapped her knuckles against it. 2 short taps, the same rhythm she used to use when they were kids. Footsteps shuffled behind the door. A pause. Then it opened. Maya stood there, belly full with life, one hand bracing her lower back, the other gripping the doorframe. Her dark curls were tied up in a messy bun, and her face was flushed with emotion before she even said a word. They stared at each other. Then Maya laughed, a sudden, breathy, emotional sound, and pulled her into a hug. God, you're really here, she said into her sister's shoulder. You made it. Amara let the hug linger, her arms wrapping gently around the rounded curve of Maya's back. Told you I would. Maya pulled back, eyes glistening. Come inside, before I start crying in front of the neighbors. Inside, the house smelled of vanilla and lavender. A baby crib was already assembled in the corner of the living room, complete with a mobile of stars and soft animals. Diapers were stacked neatly on a shelf. The couch had been turned into a temporary bed, likely for Amara. A tray with a half-finished dinner sat on the coffee table beside a stack of baby books. You hungry? Maya asked. I saved you a plate. Amara shook her head, setting her duffel down beside the couch. I'm okay, just tired. They sat. A soft hum of the ceiling fan filled the space. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. It was enough just to be. Then Maya glanced at the duffel bag and noticed the slight opening in the zipper, the fabric of the uniform still barely visible inside. You brought it, she said. Amara nodded. It's part of me. Maya hesitated. Can I? Amara reached in and gently pulled out the folded uniform, placing it on her lap. Then, wordlessly, she handed it over. Maya accepted it as though it were glass, fragile, sacred. Her fingers ran across the name tape. Thompson. This saw things, Maya whispered. It did, Amara said softly. Maya looked at her. You saw things. I did. Another silence. Heavier this time. I kept thinking about you out there, Maya said. Every day. I'd see the headlines, the casualty counts. I thought, if I ever lost you without saying goodbye, or without seeing your face again. Her voice cracked. You didn't lose me, Amara said gently. I came back. I just didn't know how to come home. Maya reached over, took her sister's hand. You don't have to know how. You just have to walk through the door. Amara looked at her sister's hand, soft, strong, maternal, and realized how long it had been since someone touched her without expectation, without orders, without protocol. Just love. They sat like that for a while. A sister who had been waiting, and a soldier who had finally stopped running. Eventually, Maya stood. I'll get you a blanket, You can sleep here tonight, unless you want the guest room. Amara shook her head. The couch is fine. I like being near the door. Maya smiled faintly. You're still in it, huh? Amara nodded. Yeah, a little. As Maya walked down the hall, Amara leaned back against the couch and looked around the room. The quiet home she'd left behind. The life that had gone on without her, and yet somehow still waited for her. Her fingers traced the edge of the card in her bag. Thank you for being so brave. Welcome home. The words echoed in her mind. Home, she thought. Not just a place, but the people who remember who you are, even when you forget. Morning light streamed through the living room window, filtered by sheer white curtains that danced softly in the summer breeze. Amara stirred on the couch, her duffel bag tucked beside her like a trusted companion. The house was still quiet. No crying infants yet, no beeping alarms, no bustle of soldiers barking orders. Just birdsong and the occasional creak of floorboards settling into the day. She blinked into wakefulness, unsure for a moment where she was. Then she saw the mobile above the crib, turning gently in the breeze. And she remembered. She was home, sort of stretching quietly. Amara sat up and ran a hand through her short-cropped hair. She still hadn't fully unpacked. She rarely did. Her life had always been designed for movement, not settling. Even now, in this safe, still house, a part of her expected someone to shout her name, or for a sudden boom to ripple across the sky. But it didn't come. Instead, a soft knock on the wall drew her attention. Maya stood there in an oversized robe, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, the other holding a steaming mug of tea. You're up early, Maya said, her voice low. Old habits, Amara replied, stretching again. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't? The baby has her own alarm system now. Every few hours, just to remind me who's in charge. Amara smirked. Smart kid. Maya walked over and sat beside her sister on the couch. She handed her the tea. I made it the way you like. Still remember? Amara accepted the mug. Yeah, thank you. They sat in a quiet rhythm for a few minutes. No rush, no tension. Just a sense of shared peace neither of them had known how much they missed. I went through the guest room last night, Maya said. Found some stuff I thought you might want to see. She got up and returned with a small box. Not military issue, just a regular cardboard box, taped at the corners and scuffed with time. She placed it gently on the coffee table. Amara opened the lid. Inside were pieces of her old life, high school photos, a varsity track ribbon, a birthday card from their father before he passed, and an old folded American flag that had once hung in their living room during his deployment to Kuwait. Amara picked it up carefully. I thought you might want that, Maya said. I kept it after he died. Amara ran her fingers over the fabric, the stars carefully stitched into deep blue. He used to say, if you're going to serve, you better come back with your integrity, or not at all. He'd be proud of you. Amara looked down. He'd say I was stubborn. Maya grinned. He'd say that with pride. Amara folded the flag again, setting it beside her uniform. 2 lives intersecting, her father's and hers. 2 generations of service. 2 different kinds of grief. Suddenly Maya shifted, her hand pressing against her side. Her breath caught. Amara was immediately alert. You okay? Maya winced but smiled through it. Just a kick. She's been practicing kung fu since about 4 this morning. Amara exhaled in relief. You sure it's not the real thing? Trust me. When it's the real thing, I'll be screaming. They both laughed, the sound soft and unfamiliar after so much time apart. It was strange how laughter felt foreign to Amara now, like a second language. She hadn't spoken in years, but it felt good. Natural. Whole. Maya looked over at her. You know, when I was little, I used to think you were a superhero. Amara raised an eyebrow. Used to? Well, Maya said, chuckling, and I realized superheroes don't come home with scars, or flinch at fireworks, or stare out windows for hours like they're somewhere else. Amara lowered her gaze. Yeah, I know. But, Maya continued, then I realized, maybe the ones who do all that, who survive it and keep going anyway, maybe they're the real thing. A silence fell between them again. This one soft, not heavy. Amara didn't say anything. She just reached out and took her sister's hand. They stayed like that for a long moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of a house preparing for new life. The crib, the folded clothes, the weight of what had been carried, and what was coming later. That afternoon, a knock came at the front door. Maya answered and found a delivery driver standing with a small package. Sergeant Amara Thompson? He asked. That's my sister. She handed the box to Amara when she returned to the living room. Amara opened it carefully. Inside was a glass case, custom built, with a plaque at the bottom. Staff Sergeant Amara L. Thompson for valor and service beyond measure. Inside the case, carefully mounted, was the folded uniform. The Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, a replica of her unit's patch dot, and, folded between the medals, the crayon-drawn card from the little girl at the airport. Amara stared at it in stunned silence. There was no return address, no name, but she knew it wasn't about the medals, or even the story. It was about being seen. Maya leaned over her shoulder. Looks like someone thought your story should live somewhere safe. Amara nodded, swallowing. Hard. Yeah, looks like it finally has. And as she stood there, holding the box with both hands, her eyes welled with tears. The first in a very, very long time, not from pain, but from finally coming home. The ND.